Hi, welcome to the Masterclass. My name is Mark. This Masterclass comes after the government released 2 files into the public domain middle of November 2021 containing details of HGV and PSV operators who have committed driver's hours offences, one from 2019 and the other from 2020. Now the file from 2019 shows 12,860 operator licences from more than 40 different countries being issued with fixed penalties by the DVSA for driver's hours offences only. 12.5% or 1,625 are GB operator licences issued by the Office of the Traffic Commissioner in the UK. The total fines issued by DVSA for 2019 was £3,139,000, and that's come out of drivers' pockets. Now for 2020, there are 8,938 operator licences on the list, again from more than 40 different countries, of which 16%, so slightly higher, are GB operator licences issued by the Office of the Traffic Commissioner. Now the total fines issued by DVSA was lower, £1,760,900. I almost said only then, half the amount issued out the year before. Now obviously COVID has played a big part in these figures. Less checks and less money. Now 2018 fines totalled £3.6 million. 2019, as I've just said, 3.1 million. What's 2021 going to bring? Well, maybe a return towards these figures. And don't forget, these amounts come straight out of your pockets as a driver. Now, clearly receiving fixed penalties for driving offences is a major issue, which brings us on to the topic for this masterclass, the basics of the EU driver's hours. Now, from the outset, it's probably a good idea to mention that the rules may be clearly written, but that doesn't mean that the interpretation and the implementation of these rules are straightforward. This is why we have the horrendous levels of fixed penalties being issued each year. So let's have a little look at what the EU driver's hours are for. EU driver's hours are normally applied in both the HGV industry and the PSV industries, and under the following circumstances. For HGV, it applies when a vehicle is used for the carriage of goods by road that has a maximum permissible weight of over 3.5 tonnes. This will include any trailer. A vehicle that weighs under 3.5 tonnes and would not normally fall within the scope of the EU driver's hours rules would do if the combined weight with a trailer added exceeds this 3.5 tonne limit. Now for PSV, it applies to a vehicle that is used for the carriage of passengers by road that is constructed or permanently adapted to carry 9 or more passengers. Now for both HGV and PSV, there's exemptions where EU driver's hours rules would not apply. And there's a much more in-depth discussion over the definition of goods, but they're for another day. Let's keep things simple and assume that the EU rules are going to apply to you. Now, bear in mind that the EU rules dictate that all activities must be recorded on a tachograph, or manually if the tachograph's broken, or with the assistance of printouts from the tachograph if your driver card is faulty or if it's lost. So there's all sorts of bits and pieces of the legislation that we need to nail down. So first of all, let's have a little look about how long we can drive. So under the EU driver's hours, driving time is purely the time spent driving. The maximum continuous driving time is 4.5 hours. After this, a break of 45 minutes must be taken before starting any more driving or, crucially, undertaking any other work as well. The rules define a break as being an uninterrupted period where a driver may freely dispose of their time. Try saying that when you're drunk. Instead of taking the 45-minute break after 4.5 hours, the 45-minute break can be split into 2 periods. Now the total of the breaks must still meet the minimum requirements of 45 minutes to qualify. The first part of this split break can be taken at any time within the 4.5 hour driving period and must be a minimum of 15 minutes to qualify. Any more than 15 minutes, it doesn't qualify as a break, but it still is a break, just not towards the 45 minutes. The second part must be a minimum of 30 minutes. And the latest that the second part can start is at the end of the 4.5 cumulative driving period. If you take more than 15 minutes in the first break, bear in mind that only 15 of these minutes qualify towards the break requirement, and the second part will still need to be a minimum of 30 minutes, whatever happens. If you have a 45-minute break, or the second part of a split break, before you've completed 4.5 hours driving, then this is called wiping the slate clean. This means that you can go on to drive for a further 4.5 hours, if you like, without taking another break. You will still be limited by the maximum of 4.5 hours driving, the requirement for a 45-minute break, and the limits on maximum driving in a day. So what are the maximum driving limits in a day then? Well, first of all, let's clarify a day. A day starts after the end of a daily rest period or a weekly rest period. It's a 24-hour period from then. Daily driving time is limited to 9 hours. However, this can be extended to 10 hours, but only twice in a fixed week. We'll talk about fixed week in a second. So what about the weekly driving limit then? Well, there's two different descriptions of a week, and the one that's relevant to driving is the fixed week. The fixed week always starts first thing Monday and ends last thing Sunday. The maximum number of days that can be worked in a fixed week is 6. Working 6 days, 2 of these can be your 10 hours driving, and the other 4 would be the maximum of 9 hours driving each. So, our 6 days, 4 times 9 and 2 times 10 is 56 hours. It was when I went to school, hopefully it's still the same. This is the maximum that you can drive in one fixed week. Now we've also got limits on 2 weekly driving. The maximum driving over 2 consecutive weeks is 90 hours. That's any 2 weeks next to each other. So, an example, if you've driven the maximum of 56 hours last week, then you can only drive a maximum of 34 hours this week. 90 minus 56 is 34. If you've driven 28 hours last week, how many hours can you drive this week? 90 minus 28 is 62. But you can't drive 62 hours. The maximum of 56 hours in 1 week applies. Therefore, the total amount of driving over this 2-week period is going to be 28 plus your 56, which is 84 hours. Now, as well as the driving limits, the provisions also cover rest periods. Again, according to the regulations, a rest period is defined as an uninterrupted period where a driver may freely dispose of their time. Now, the government website gives indications of what can be counted as rest and what cannot be counted as rest. I'm not going to go into that here. So, let's have a little look at the daily rest periods first. In every 24-hour period, a driver must take a daily rest. There are 3 different rest periods available, and what you can legally take is worked out by considering the working week instead of a fixed week. Working week is defined as the days between 2 weekly rest periods. Now, firstly, a regular daily rest period, which is at least 11 continuous hours of rest, or, secondly, a driver can take a reduced rest period where a minimum of 9 continuous hours rest is taken, but less than 11, but you can only do this up to 3 times in a working week. Now, alternatively, your regular rest period can be split into 2 periods. Unsurprisingly, this is called a split rest period. Now, your first period must be at least 3 hours of uninterrupted rest, and the second period must be at least 9 hours of uninterrupted rest. This gives you a minimum total of 12 hours rest combined. Your first 3 hours can be taken at any point throughout the day. Now, these rest periods can all be mixed and matched to suit, providing the reduced rests are not taken more than 3 times in the working week. With a split rest, although you're only taking 9 hours rest in one continuous period, it doesn't count as a reduced rest. So, theoretically, a driver could do 3 reduced rests with 9 hours off between shifts and 3 split rest periods, again with only 9 hours off between shifts. What a week that would be, eh? Now, as well as daily rests, there are also weekly rest periods, and your weekly rest periods must be taken after a maximum of 6 24-hour periods, or 144 hours in total. Now, once again, the rules clearly define weekly rest periods as being able to freely dispose of their time. You're under no obligations. Two different rest periods are available, either a regular weekly rest period or a reduced weekly rest period. Now, the minimum requirements are that in any 2 consecutive fixed weeks, note we're back onto fixed weeks for this, not working week, starting first thing Monday, ending last thing Sunday, a driver must take at least 2 regular weekly rests or 1 regular weekly rest and 1 reduced weekly rest. You cannot take 2 reduced weekly rest periods in 2 consecutive weeks. This is a minimum. So any additional rest periods can be taken, and these can be either regular or reduced to suit. So what's the difference between a regular weekly rest period and a reduced weekly rest period? Well, a regular weekly rest period is at least 45 continuous hours of rest. A reduced weekly rest period is at least 24 hours continuous hours of rest as a minimum, but less than 45. Now, any reduction between the 45 hours and the 24 hours minimum must be compensated for, what they call en bloc. So that reduction must be taken in one block and added to a qualifying period of rest which exceeds 9 hours. So it can be added to a reduced daily rest, a regular daily rest, or a regular weekly rest, but it can't be added to another reduced weekly rest. Now, for example, let's take a reduced weekly rest of 24 hours, which is your minimum. It will leave us with compensation of 21 hours that we've not taken. 45 minus our 24 gives us 21 hours. So this 21 hours must be paid back by the end of the 3rd week following the week in which the compensation was taken. So if we take a reduced weekly rest in, let's say, week 1, then week 2 would be the 1st week following the reduction, week 3 would be the 2nd week following the reduction, and week 4 would be the 3rd week following the reduction. So if you add the 21 hours en bloc, so all of the 21 together, to a regular weekly rest period, you would need 45 hours plus the 21 hours off, all in one go, so 66 hours in total. And remember, this must be before the end of the 3rd week following the week in question. This brings me on to where can we take our rest periods. This was changed a little bit recently. So, daily rests, whether regular or reduced, can be taken in a vehicle which must be stationary, providing the vehicle is equipped with suitable sleeping facilities designed primarily for sleeping in. So you can't throw a board across the front seats like you used to and sleep on that. Now, reference to stationary, I think, is probably more aimed at drivers doing multi-manning. I'd be somewhat concerned if your vehicle's moving and you're on your own. I'd get your handbrake checked. Reduced weekly rests can also be taken in a vehicle. Again, suitable sleeping facilities and stationary. Now, regular weekly rests cannot be taken in a vehicle. These rules changed August 2020. Regular weekly rests must be taken in gender-friendly accommodation, so hotel, hostel, rental accommodation, etc. And this has got to be paid for by the employer. Now, we've spoken about the rules of EU driver's hours, but what about if we encounter an emergency? Can we break the rules? Firstly, let's not call it breaking the rules. Let's class it as deviating from the rules. Sounds much better. So EU rules don't actually tell us what they would class as an emergency, but we can draw on the legislation in the GB domestic hours for guidance. It outlines situations where you are trying to prevent danger to the life and health of animals, restoring essential public services, which includes gas, water, electric, drainage, electronic communication, postal services, roads and railways, just to name a few, or to prevent serious damage to property. Now you can also deviate from the rules in exceptional circumstances, but it must be exceptional circumstances, to either reach a suitable stopping place to ensure the safety of persons, vehicle or its load, or to reach the operating centre or driver's home. But again, must stress exceptional circumstances. This is really where unforeseen events unexpectedly make it impossible to comply with the EU driver's hours rules. Now, such examples given by the European Court of Justice helps to provide a little clarity on the interpretation. And that's that a driver may decide to depart from the rules in events such as severe weather, road traffic accidents, mechanical breakdowns, or anything that is likely to cause danger to life or health of people and animals, providing, crucially, that road safety is not affected. Now, what we've covered in this video is the basics of the provisions within the regulations. There are more in-depth descriptions of some of the criteria which can be found in various publications on the government website. I hope it's been useful, I hope it's been informative. Thanks very much for watching. If you've got any comments, pop them below. Don't forget to press like and subscribe to see more videos as they become available. Take care, drive carefully, and look after your money. See you soon.